Hello, welcome to another edition of Truth in Rhythm, brought to you by funkandstuff.net. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. Available in video format at funkandstuff.net and on YouTube, Truth in Rhythm can also be enjoyed on the go in its audio podcast edition from funkandstuff.net, iTunes, and other leading providers. I'm your host, Scott Dr. G.X. Goldfine, musicologist and author of Everything is on the One, the First Guide to Funk. If you don't have your copy, you better get on over to Amazon and pick one up. Start the new year off right. Whether you're watching or listening, as always, I thank you very much for your continued interest and support. And in this case, you've tuned in for another great episode because my guest is Glenn Murdock, co-founder and singer of the groundbreaking funk rock band Mother's Finest. With a lineup that could seamlessly and authentically swing from guitar-fueled riffage to bass-driven grooves to soulful R&B, sometimes within the same song, Mother's Finest notched 3 consecutive gold-selling albums in the late 1970s. Fronted by fiery singer Joyce Kennedy, who also enjoyed solo success in the 1980s, the band's assortment of fantastic songs included You'll Like It, Here, Give You All the Love Inside of Me, Baby Love, Truth Will Set You Free, Can't Fight the Feeling, Don't Want to Come Back, and the hit ballad Love Changes. In the process, the group became famous worldwide for its ferocious live shows. Mother's Finest has continued to deliver knockout shows up to the present day, and also released new albums in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and most recently in 2015. The intense funk rock force of Mother's Finest, a daring band that stuck to its guns with an exciting blend of genres, despite the many obstacles cast in their path through the years, continues to shine brightly as we head into 2018, a fact of which we should all feel very grateful for. I know I do. I'm delighted to welcome Glenn Murdock, a core mother in Mother's Finest, to Truth in Rhythm. How are you, Glenn?
I'm pretty good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Coming to us from Atlanta, Georgia, right?
Yeah, Stone Mountain, Georgia, funk rock, Georgia. That's what we call it.
Yeah, very, very good. It's been cold, but I'm sure you're keeping it hot with some good shows you've been playing recently.
Oh yeah, we've been working pretty hard and steady. You know, it's been fun.
That's a beautiful thing. You guys are still keeping it going like you are.
Yeah, I mean, it is rewarding, you know, and we're just trying to change, make it better, make it a little different, you know, with the same, you know, attitude, you know. So we have a couple of releases that we can talk about too, that I'd like for people to get into, because you mentioned You'll Like It Here, and we have these people over in England, and it is on the website. I gotta get you hip to that, but it's called Anthology, Love Changes, and it's got like 37 songs from the 70s and 80s on it. You know, you'll like it. Yeah. Oh, you got it. Look at that. Oh, there you go. Fantastic. You are a fan, aren't you?
Oh, this is an awesome set. This is a terrific compilation.
Yeah, it is. I like it. I really do. I mean, you know, it's you know, because we did it, and it takes you down memory lane, so to speak, and it's also some silly stuff in there from the way we were thinking, you know, love, peace, and happiness, and you know, but it's good though. It's got some good music, and Joyce sounds fantastic as usual, even, you know, especially back then. Pretty amazing.
We'll touch on this one again before we wrap it up. But Glenn, I want to jump in and kind of get viewers acquainted with more of your background. So how did you first get into music, going back even before Mother's Finest?
Joyce and I met in Chicago, and we were doing this sort of duet type thing, you know. we were doing like show clubs, and that was the big thing in Chicago at the time, right along through the late 60s. Wow. And that's when Sly and the Family Stone and Jimi Hendrix and the music scene was changing. And so we were doing, for lack of a better word, a kind of Vegas-y type act. We were doing covers and we were wearing tuxedos and gowns, and we actually went over to the Far East and did a couple of tours over there. We were working pretty good too, in between our jobs. And when we saw Sly Stone, and then I started getting familiar with Hendrix, and in Chicago there was a band called Baby Huey and the Babysitters, and Rush Street was opening up. There was plenty of acid to go around, and we're all opening up our heads to, about different and self-contained mostly, and this revolt of doing original music, getting away from the corporate music at the time. You could Joyce, when she did her first records, she would go into this massive studio. I think it was Mercury, if I'm not mistaken, and there would be like a 30-piece orchestra, and she would sing in a booth, and they would just throw it down right then and right there. She was told, she was given the melody and the script, and she would go in there, and in a couple of hours, well, I'd probably take her all day. Nothing like it grew to be self-contained, to sit and write your own stuff, your own feelings, and you were usually singing somebody else's stuff. And then when you went out to do shows, you would do covers. And so, I don't know, this idea, we did our last tour in the Southeast. We went everywhere over, not the Southeast, what is that? The over in the East. I mean Bangkok, Thailand, Japan, Okinawa. Yeah. We would go over there for a month, and we would do these tours. They were like USO tours. We do a lot of military, mostly. And then we do some hotels, and it was all spit, shine, and glory, and when we came back, we didn't want to go back to our jobs anymore. And so we said, let's do a band. Let's see if we can do a band like Sly and Hendrix. And we were naturally into rock. And of R&B, gospel, jazz. Chicago was a great blues town. So anyway, what we decided to do is make a band, and we didn't know how we were going to do it with two front people, really into being front as much as making sure that Joyce was doing it. And I didn't play any instruments, so I just had to be an annoyance to anybody who came in contact with you. And it was from there that we decided we went on some gigs as just like a duet type of, for lack of a better word. And then when we got down to, we did a gig in Dayton, Ohio, where we met Mo, and we decided, for some strange reason, we decided that we wanted to do original music. We started writing right away, but it wasn't, every place we worked is, no, you do covers. We do covers here, and maybe we sneak in some kind of original piece of material, which was relative to a lot of stuff that we were doing. When you wrote originals back in those days, it was always trying to sound like what was going on. So when we met Mo was the first incarnate of Mother's Finest. And he was 17 years old. We were all barely, I don't know what got into us, but especially Joyce and I. I mean, we were afforded traveling around, so that's what we did. We traveled around and went to different towns, and ended up in Dayton, Ohio, like I said. And then Mo, we saw Mo playing in a band called Raspberry Blues, and he was the only standout in I don't know if it was Karma or whatever. But we had a conversation with him, and we also had a conversation with this one guy who wanted us to play in his band down in Florida. So we were on the road. I mean, for all intents and purposes, we were doing the hippie thing in the car and drove down to Florida. And this band didn't like what we were about. To be honest with you, it was a race thing. They were not really into having black lead singers, much less two. So we did a trip all the way down there with the bass player of the band who was guaranteed us that we was going to get into this band. And he apologized, and we stayed at his house, and we decided what to do next is we was going to make our own band. So Joyce, we were still kind of working the beach, so to speak, and we were doing these little clubs. And then we met this bass player who had just came from Vietnam, and he was playing in the club, and we said, we want to start a band. Are you interested? And he says, not really, because it just came from Vietnam. I'm still kind of blown away, but I have a brother, and he's working down there at the Hump Room on the beach with Tommy Strand and the Upper Hand, which was like about a 10-piece orchestra type band. Everybody was into these show bands. So we said, okay, his name's Jerry. To go down there, and he had spoken to his brother, and there he was, and with a white suit on and a vest and this big enormous afro, and we talked to him, and he was, he and Mo were the same age. Joyce and I were a little older, so he was 17 as well. But he was all down with it, man. But he was so young that his parents, his mother, was going on the road with this hippie group, and you had white people and black people in the same. And he would send. He's got about it's 12 of them, and half of them are all guys, and I think he's the youngest male. So all his brothers were kind of not digging it. And Mom said, go and get my son. We were living in this house that we had rented. I don't know how that was. It was so long ago. We were in this house, and we drug him to this house, and we rehearsed with him. It was actually the bass player's house. I'm sorry. The bass player that abandoned us. And so we had to find a new drummer and a new bass player. So we got Wizard. And it was Jerry's time, and try to make the a long story shorter, then we needed a drummer, and we marched around Miami Beach. We got this guy who was almost blind, but boy, could he play! And he was innovative too, because he was sort of miking up all of his drums without microphones. I don't know how he did it, but that's how we knew where he was when somebody told us about him. I forgot his name. What's his name? We call him Blind. I think that's what everybody in the neighborhood was calling him, because he had glasses like Coke bottles, But he could. So we heard this giant sound coming from, and would you be interested in joining our group? And he said, yeah. And at the time, we had making a long story shorter. Then we went to this club with this band. And we said, we have a band too, and we want to audition. And the guy said, no, absolutely not. So we went to his competition, which was called the Flying Machine in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that particular club was called The Scene, and it was like a big hippie club, and it was huge. It had bean bags for chairs, and it was really cool, But the Flying Machine was a smaller place, but it was on fire. It was electric. And Paul kind of knew of us because we were scavenging around trying to find musicians. And we said, Paul, we want to audition for you. And he was like, I don't know, guys, without John, which was the bass player that everybody knew. So without John, I don't know. I said, just try us out, you know? And so he said, okay. And we auditioned for him. He said, well, you guys sound good enough. I'll work you guys next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend. So we had a chance to rehearse with our 3 pieces. And we did. We rehearsed our brains out, stayed up all night, you know, did lots of acid and smoked a lot of marijuana. That's what it's called nowadays. And we rehearsed, and when we went back and played that weekend, he didn't feel the necessity of booking anybody else. So he said, you know, well, are you guys available next week? And we said, we're like available, period, you know. That was the only club that we actually auditioned and got the job. Worked for 16 weeks in that club. It was Joyce, myself, Wizard. The drummer didn't last. So we imported this Douglas from Dayton, Ohio, that he had been begging for a little to play with us. So we imported him and a keyboard player and a sax player. But the keyboard player and the sax player were heroin addicts, we found out. And they weren't really into the music as much as they was into getting stoned and getting high, and not like we weren't, but they were too hard for us. So we sent them home. And so it was Douglas and Wizard and Mo, 3 pieces, and Joyce and myself. And do stuff. Joyce and I were very into vocals, you know, and because it was 2 of us, we would do a lot of harmonies. We do a lot of horn parts and stuff like that. So anyway, I ended up working 16 weeks in this club. And in the interim, everybody on South Beach came to see us in that club. We had lines going around the corner, and then there were competitions. You know, these bands wanted to come in, and 3 pieces. They couldn't believe it was 3 pieces and 2 vocalists, and they were making all this noise.
Glenn, what were you calling yourselves at that point?
We sat down. I don't know when we decided Mother's Finest, but we were in John's house, kicked out of his house. And we said, well, what do we want to name this? And we were into, we were going to name it Master's Children. And because of mysticisms at the time, we were still getting kind of stoned, but these masters over in India were what we were seeking, you know, at the time. But we still didn't at the time, but we said, no, that's not a good name. You know, it sounds like Masa's Children or whatever. So we said, that's not good. So we said, well, what kind of music do we want to make? You know, it's not jazz, not pop, it's not rock, it's not R&B. We just want to make some just, you know, it was undescribable. So we wanted to be motherfuckers. You can scratch that if you want to. That's I guess we were kind of stoned at the time. We said we want to be motherfuckers. That's what we want to be. We want everybody to know that this band is Mother's Finest is motherfuckers. And so we can't name ourselves that. So what are we going to do? So we took the initials. And with the initials, Joyce came up with Mother's Finest. We want to be super motherfuckers. So we put a Superman shield around MF. And there it was, you know, and since then, that's what we've tried to be. And it's been just, we didn't get the notoriety because we were doing something that I was due. Unbeknownst to our own badass selves, that we thought it was a free fall, that we can make our own music, we can be individual, and we could come at you with this music, which we thought was really good stuff, you know. And it's, you know, like I said, we were flower children, hippie type, you know, and very black, mixed at the same time with Mo, and eventually with BB. So um, we just thought that we could do our own music. But and when we got our first record deal, the second record deal, let's skip over that first one. The first one was with RCA with this very corny guy. We did Tie Yellow River Around the Old Oak Tree, Mathis, and I forgot the other guys, Dave Mathis, and yeah, I can't think of the other guy's name. But I mean, hey, we was like, okay, you know, and they gave us a lot of coke, which we
was it Dave
into.
Appel or Hank
Dave
Medress?
Yeah, it could be Dave. But I can't think, man. This stuff goes so. I'll think of it in a minute. But Dave and something or another. But anyway, they wrote "Lion Sleeps Tonight," and they were doing round the Tie Yellow River Around the Old Oak Tree. They had monster hits, you know. So they signed us up with RCA for 2 records. The first record got out, the second record didn't. And the reason why it didn't is because of our insistence. We didn't want it to go out because the production was horrible. We got in the studio and we went up to New York and we had all of our original material. We did all of our original stuff and we recorded it, and then we gave it over to them. They went up to New York. We went to Atlanta. They stayed in New York, and they commenced to changing a lot of stuff, overdubbing horns. We didn't have one horn in our group, never. And they put more background singers on there, and they changed the arrangements some kind of way where they were putting all these musicians on there. And we went up to our manager's office. His name was Hugh Rogers. Went up to his office, and we were just as happy as we could be. This is our first time we put out our original music, and he played the thing, and we cried. All of us sat around in this office. We had champagne and everything. We finished the champagne, smoked a couple of joints, and we said, "Oh, we don't ever want to hit the streets." Well, by that time, of course, we didn't have any control over where it was going to hit the streets, and it did. But we told him definitely we're not going to do any promo on the second one. And it's more interesting, but we weren't anxious to see how they was going to screw that one up. So we decided that we were just going to do live. You know, we were doing live. We were traveling all over the Southeast, up to DC and maybe as far as New York. You know, we didn't do a lot in LA or California, but the Southeast was really good for us. And we travel and get in our vans and we just travel, you know. And then we were playing in this club in Atlanta, and all the Atlanta-based rock groups were there. We did the rock clubs, you know, there was no group like ours. It was so unique, you know, because we were, like I said, obviously predominantly Black, and we were doing our own brand of funk rock. And then this guy, he was a male guy too, and he had been there to see. I think we were playing. Leonard Skinner was there, or I'm pretty sure it was Leonard Skinner before anybody knew anything about it. We're playing in a club. So this guy comes in, and he's like a male. He worked in the mail department at CBS Records. So he gets us asked permission to come back to the dressing room. And he said, "Do you guys have a record deal?" I said, "No, we don't have a record deal. We don't want a record deal because, you know, these guys messed up our record and we don't want to go through that again." So the next day, this guy, Tom Werman, came down. And Tom Werman is famous for Ted Nugent and what's the big guy's name? But I won't do that. I can't. Meatloaf. And a hair band from LA. I can't think of the name of them. But anyway, he was a good producer. He was probably one of the best producers that we had, and we eventually found out. So he came to us and he said, "So you guys you're not signed with anybody else?" And I said, "Well, we got a manager, you know, but you know, we're not real happy with him right now for getting us into this situation." So he says, So you guys want to do another record?" We said, "No, not really." He said, do you have any original material? I said, yeah, we're always writing, we got a bunch of stuff. And he said, so why don't you want to record? I said, because, it's all fixed. I mean, these guys, and we told him what the story was. And he said, I promise you, guys play what you're playing and how you're playing tonight that I just heard, I'm only going to make it better. I'm not going to tamper with it. I'm not going to change anything. So we believed it and went into the studio with him and they cut our first record with him. Very pleased with it. Tom was a great guy. We fought a lot in the studio because we wanted to do some things. He wanted us to be a little harder than we were. And CBS was very, very excited about what he'd done, Epic Records. Promised that they were going to make us bigger than the Beatles, bigger than Led Zeppelin. I mean, I'm not. I am not messing with the truth. We were in the auditorium and they had us slides that this is going to be, and I do believe it would have happened too if they would have left us alone. But it was a black group and trying to rock. What are we going to do with these people? Who's going to play them? It was time then that you the Earth, Wind and Fire told us, what are you, why you didn't put no funk on the record? Who's going? We laughed. It was Verdine. I gotta throw him under the bus. But he got in my face and he said, why didn't you put any funk on the record? And I'm going, what do you define funk?
Yeah. There's funk on there.
No, yeah, I mean, it's like, I said, and then I would point out a couple of songs. I said, this ain't funky to you? He says, well, yeah, it's okay, but it's got too much rock in it. We had Gamble and Huff come up to the studio and they said that they wanted to produce us and they gave us a lot of material and we was going, this is not us. And I think in the interim, we made a decision that, because we would call up in the big man's office, this head guy in the black department of CBS who was located on the 7th floor. He called up and he told us, he says, kids will not accept you. There will never be a poster. How did he put that? There'll never be a poster of Michael Jackson on the back of a bedroom door of a white teenager. And then, of course, Michael made a liar out of him after they went through the whole the political struggle that they have to get him on MTV and the rest of it. So you have to make a decision at the time, and we did, consciously, unconsciously, or whatever, that we were going to play the music that we wanted to play and we enjoy playing. Even when Joyce went and did a solo record, she stepped out of the box. The music was fantastic, but they wanted her to dress a certain way. They wanted to try to control what she was doing. And she ran back to the group going like, it's silly. Why would anybody want to do that when there's 1,000 people at a time doing it and another 1,000 trying to break down the doors to do what they're doing, why don't these people get are different, and we can make a difference. But there was some big people in the record business that had made up their minds that this should not happen. Point blank. Years later we found out some big people. I'm not going to name them because they could still send people after me. But they decided that music would change everything. It would change, and you have to notice that if you were too much diversity, then one guy described white people on one side, black people on the other side of the street, and then there's a spotted dog running down the middle of the street. Doesn't know which side to go to. Well, we knew exactly where we wanted to be. Middle of the street was just fine with us. But it wasn't, but in the record business, when they had all the control, then you had to choose which side of the street you were going on. And we were told by this big guy in the record company, listen, not going to make it doing this type of music, you know. But we made it a lot further than they anticipated, you know, than they thought, you know. And we could have made it a lot further, but we were like, for instance, let's not put pictures on the when we send this single to the DJs. Let's not put a picture on there. And the DJs got the record. Oh, who is this? Mother's Finest song, very good. And they played it. Oh, I liked it. This is the single. And we played the single. They played the single. And this guy was a DJ in Chicago. When he found out that we were predominantly Black, he immediately stopped playing the record. And I think the word was out that this is not, because we were playing on rock stations, you know. There it was. So again, we were faced with the record company saying you need to do at least something like Earth, Wind and Fire is doing, or like the Commodores, or like the Isley Brothers, and we were just like, they're already doing that, you know.
Hey, Glenn, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
Yeah. So, man, it's infuriating. It always infuriates me to hear, you know, stories like that where, you know, those kinds of external forces affect the music and affect, you know, who gets to hear it and where it goes and, you know, how it ends up coming out and getting to people's ears. It's maddening. But I want to just mention that first record before we move on, because it was a really strong record in 1976, Mother's Finest. That included Give You All the Love Inside of Me, which I don't care what Verdine says, that song is funky.
Oh my God.
Also Fly With Me, and
Yeah.
Rain is a really good hard rocking tune.
Oh,
And
sure.
In line with what you're talking about, Glenn, you have that track in there called Niggas Can't Sing Rock and Roll. So
Yeah.
you were already like confronted with that situation. When you actually put a record out like that spoke to that, how was the response when you did that?
So we were working at this club and we were doing music and people in that club. This is how that song is sort of it didn't start out that way. It started out with What You Do with What You Got. It was written by somebody in Shanana. And I just loved the it was a heavy funk groove, but the words were very silly, you know. So we messed around with it a little bit. We were playing in this club, and then this woman, she was very, very drunk, and we were down in Columbia, South Carolina, and she had gotten wasted, and she jumped up and she says, "Why y'all singing that white man's music?" And we was gonna, and I said, and belligerent as one could be, I said, well, we went to the whole thing about, you know, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, and what is that? What kind of music is that? And what you're saying is niggas can't sing rock and roll. Niggas don't sing rock and roll. Niggas are not allowed to sing rock and roll. Which one are you trying to say? And then that song goes like, okay, I gotta write this song, you know? And with this it was like, wow. And it just sort of sucked itself into it. And I'm sure that it caused us a lot of problems. One problem was here in Atlanta, and people liked it. It was like a bold statement, you know, that shouldn't be heard right now, maybe later, but not right now. But some DJ thought he was being funny, and he played that doggone record, and it was in one of the biggest department stores that this thing was on, and it's just blasting all over the departments. I don't know, and I've been told, and this woman went to the manager. He said, I want to see the manager right now about what kind of music you guys are playing. And then Jesse Jackson sent us, I don't know how, he didn't call us, but he sent somebody after us. He said, you know, you guys got to settle down. I don't know where you think you're at, but you're in Atlanta, Georgia now, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So, but we never did, we didn't stop doing it. We just didn't like push it, and we weren't trying to lay it on people. And when we tell this very, very cool story about how it started, and the fact that it is very interesting that this genre of rock was correct me if I'm wrong, had been started by especially Fats Domino and
Chuck Berry.
No, what the I'm getting old now.
Chuck Berry, Little Richard.
Chuck Berry is the grandfather, the Pope of rock and roll. He's the ones that the Rolling Stones probably came and copied after more than anybody. You know, that one of the longest living legend rock bands in history. They got their whole thing from Chuck Berry. I think Chuck Berry, probably Chuck Berry alone. I mean, that's where I come from. I come from Chicago. I've seen Chuck Berry live. God, every time I could have. You know, that's where the influence comes from. Him and anybody else that was, you know, Fats Domino, Little Richard. My God, it was like I was just blown away. That's the music that I was raised on. You know, I wasn't raised on. I mean, although it was there, mostly blues. First blues, and then black rock as I know it, and then what I call it, you know. So yeah, I was pissed, and so I wanted everybody to know, you know, we would play for audiences of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, white people, you know, and I would just like I thought that was the best time for me to be able to do that, and people's mouths would fly wide open. I thought it was wonderful. I thought this is what music is all about, especially back in the 60s and 70s. You know, we had to bitch about a lot of things that was low on the totem pole, and wasn't nobody holding that up at the time. You know, later everybody was using the word, you know, especially in rap music, and nothing else. But and I always have to ask, and we'll put that song away for a while. It'll be like, we got to bring that back. We got to sing that again. It's time, you know. And I tell you a little story too. I know stop me if you want to say anything, but we played DC. We took this long ride up to DC, and we were playing the Howard Theater. And the Howard Theater, I don't know who it was that got us up there. It was some promoters. And Howard Theater is a great little place. It's all made of all wood. It's got a small balcony. You can probably get about 700 people packed to the walls in that place. So we did 3 shows that day. And first show we did, you hardly fill up the bottom part of it. The second show, we kind of fill up both. And then the third show, the place was so hot. There was no air conditioning, and it was glorious. It was fantastic. But before this last show, this one brother who had came to both shows, and he said, and we were hanging out in the audience on the edge of the stage, talking to these brothers. And this one brother, and he was very muscular. He had been lifting weights, and he wore his hat on the side of his head, and he was very stoned. And he said, Murdock. I said, yes, sir. He said, Murdock, he said, I've been listening to y'all and played all the cool songs. He said, but there's one song you haven't played, and you're going to have to play that before you get out of here, son. You know, he might have been a little older than I was. I doubt it. But I said, sir, what song is that? He said, niggas can't sing rock and roll. He said, well, what are we doing? He said, this is why I came out. But 2 shows, and I'm getting ready to come to third. Do we have that on the list? And I'm going, dude, really? You want me to do that? And I was really, really, really not into doing it. you know. But he said, we're going to have a situation if you don't do this song. And he said, here, this might give you a little courage. He gave me a joint. He said, go back and smoke this and do my song next time. And of course, I did the song for Fear of My Life. And people were stunned, and they were like, wow. And that got us on the DC. I mean, every time we went back to DC, the venues were bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we had to do that song, of course, along with the rest of the songs. And, it's a funny thing about having that kind of popularity. You're always going to be in between the in between. You're not gonna be allowed to be a very popular band, because you're gonna be a bad influence on groups, and people are gonna want to do the same kind of music if we make it popular. So it was, we understood later that this was just not gonna happen. And then we had to make up our minds, when we keep going, and we, for all intents and purposes, we're going to stand our ground. It would have been boring to do anything else. This was very exciting for us. We enjoyed every bit of it.
I have so many thoughts and questions for you, Glenn, because, as growing up as a white kid who was really into Black music, I faced so many of those kinds of racial issues around music, and it was always just very frustrating and confusing to me growing up. But you weren't totally alone in the 70s. There was some acts that were, if not going as far as Mother's Finest, they were doing some of that. And I'm wondering if you guys paid much attention to people like Funkadelic or early Rufus with Shaka Khan out front, kind of like Joyce, or Max Ann, or any of these other bands like that. Were they on your radar? Were you friends? Were you checking them out?
What was Miles Davis's, what was her name? God dog it, but she was a rocker too. She was a Black rocker. What was her name? Betty Davis. Sorry, Betty. But she's, I don't think she's around. But a lot of, yes, absolutely. You could hardly not. We were alienated by a lot of the bands that would, I don't know if we want to hang out with you guys or not. But all the underground type bands, Funkadelic, we had a great relationship with George and the Funkadelics. We had a tenuous relationship with Prince when he came along. He would always sneak into where we were playing and hug the back wall and swear that he wasn't there before. We knew people who knew people there, watching our shows. Leonard Skinner, we had a great relationship with Leonard Skinner before they had that accident. We traveled with the Who. The Who loved us and wanted to take Joyce home with them. Couldn't happen. I mean, everybody who had a little edge to them, everybody who was willing to step out there a little bit, appreciated exactly what we were doing, and wanted us to do more. AC/DC, we played AC/DC. We brought us on their tour. P-Funk brought us on their tour. We did a tour across Canada with the Who. A lot of bands we played with, like Ozzy's band,
Black Sabbath.
That was funny because that was pretty amazing. That was the first and last time we ever actually got stuff thrown at us, and the guys holding up a cross in the front row. And this is what happened. We went on, and I don't know, for some reason we would walk on the stage, and you can only see our silhouettes. There was no light shining directly onto us. And when we started off, we played half the song in the dark, and people were just going crazy. And then when the lights came on at the end of the song, people were like, it was stone quiet, and we knew at that time that we better get on out of here. And we did the next song, and it was boo, and then the third song was Niggas Can't Sing, and people just kind of freaked out. It was just like there was a murmur. It wasn't like it wasn't hate or it wasn't consent, but it was a murmur of disbelief.
Well,
Um,
I want to say, Glenn, that one of the really sad things about it too is that, I mean, the situation hasn't even changed that much 40 years later, really.
that's
And
is,
I was at the Rolling Stones concert in '81 at the Coliseum in Los Angeles when Prince got booed off the stage and stuff was thrown
oh
at him,
wow.
and I was so outraged. So it's a sad state of affairs, but thank goodness there are people who are brave like you guys and Mother's Finest and pushed the envelope and did what's right musically. You know what I mean?